Tuesday, which happened yesterday in America. It's the DNC race to be the nominee over there, and it looks like the entire establishment are coalescing around Joe Biden, who honestly has one of those. You remember George W. Bush, when he was "Fool me once, fool man can't get fooled again," that gaff. He has one of those every 3 days at the moment, Joe Biden does. And everybody's coalesced around him in the establishment, and he had a really good Super Tuesday, so much so that you can see there, he won Alabama, he won Arkansas. I mean, some of these are huge margins as well. Look at that. I expected that in Alabama, though. 63.2% of the vote in Alabama. Arkansas, the same, 40.6% of the vote. California, Bernie won, which was big, because obviously that's where I think 415 delegates, yeah, there you go, 415 delegates came from. That's where, but obviously it wasn't a big win. So the big winner of the night was Joe Biden. That was the person who won. And for those of you in America that are sad about this and worried, you should be, because I watched the same thing happen to Jeremy Corbyn last year, and my UK viewers will back me up on this, as is happening to Bernie Sanders this year. What is happening to him is so similar to Jeremy Corbyn. If you actually look at it, yeah, last year Jeremy Corbyn came into 2019 on a wave of grassroots support, and he had had a pretty good previous year. I seem to remember in the December saying he's played a blinder this year. However, he had two major problems and big things going against him. The first thing is, while he had the support of the people, he didn't have the support of his party. Now, obviously, Bernie's not a Democrat. They will yell at you in America. But the party that he's running in, he doesn't have their support. And not only does this leave him defenseless, really, for attacks from within, leaves him wide open to them, because he's running in the party instead of against it, like he's winning elections the world over at the moment, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, etc. It's alienating his base support as well by doing that, because his base support, remember, are fed up with politics as usual. They're fed up with reaching out and incrementalism. They're fed up. They need a radical change to the degree where some people are saying that they'll vote for Boris Johnson for change. Yes, they'll vote for the ruling party for change. You see my point. It's going to alienate his base support, and even if he does win, of course, the fact that his party is against him it'll basically neuter him from getting anything done. It's going to make it extremely difficult. And that's just the first big problem he's got. And it's the same one as Corbyn had last year. The second big problem, again, is the same one that Corbyn had last year, because powerful people and powerful factions within the government and establishment of the United States will stop at nothing to create a narrative which turns the people who are supporting Sanders against him. And like Corbyn, he's faced a smear campaign, and he's been leaning into it. He's been leaning into a smear campaign instead of rebelling against it and pointing it out for the nonsense that it is, the way Trump has been doing, which really people like, including me. I love it when Donald Trump is honest, even when it's horrifically honest. With Corbyn, it was the anti-Semitism smear, of course. You know, and I've said this many times, when it first reared, he could have, and they first smeared him with it, they first tried it years ago, he could have knocked it out of the park for 6 straight away. Straight away. Because had he put the rights of Palestinians front and centre and said, no, this isn't about anti-Semitism, this is because I stand up for the rights of Palestinians, who are Semites, by the way. If he'd have said that, and he'd have put Palestinian rights front and centre, they would have struggled to ask him that question again. You certainly wouldn't have got Andrew Neil asking him it over and over and over like he did. Because the last thing the evil bastards against Jeremy Corbyn wanted was to highlight the crushing illegal occupation of Israel and their crimes against Palestinians, who, like I said, were Semites. Had he said that, he would have knocked it out the park. They wouldn't have been able to smear him with it again. It was the equivalent of a tap-in. He could have put the thing that he was fighting for his whole life front and centre, and he didn't. Instead of tapping the ball in, he decided to try and dribble it round 4 or 5 people, do some keepy-uppy in the middle of the park, and do an overhead kick from 40 yards, trying to get it into the top corner by making some broader point about racism that I think he was trying to say. Israel's treatment against Palestinians was racist by saying, I deplore racism of all forms. But if that's the case, why didn't he just come out and say it, you know? But he didn't. He leaned into it. He said, racist. He leaned into the smear. And it cost him. And likewise, Bernie Sanders has been leaning into a smear for a few years now. He's been leaning into a conspiracy. He's been leaning into something that isn't true. And that, of course, is Russiagate. And he's been trying to play ball with people who, quite honestly, will break the rules entirely going down the line to make sure he doesn't give the people Medicare for all and make sure he isn't the nominee, make sure he isn't president. Yeah? They will beat him over the head with this Russiagate smear now, mercilessly, like it's a blunt instrument. And he's playing into it, and it's the same problem Corbyn had. Instead of calling Russiagate out as bullshit from the start, which he could do, instead of saying, oh, it was the DNC that rigged the primary, it wasn't the Russians, instead of saying that, instead of telling the truth, he leaned into it, and he gave it credence. Leaving the door wide open for them to use it against him in the coming months. They're already trying to do it now. And not only are they rigging the primary, I mean, those results are incredible. And they're not on paper ballots, remember. They're on automatic voting machines that can be hacked by an 8-year-old still. And they know it, and still they keep them. They'd rather lose to a cartoon character with a history of racism and questionable morals who'll toe the establishment line than win with a progressive like Sanders or indeed Corbyn. And that's the problem that they're facing right now in America. I mean, even Trump knocks this out the park. The Russians are propping you up, Bernie. The Russians are trying to get you to win, Bernie. In the media, in the New York Times, even Trump's like, well, you got that from the intelligence services, my intelligence services, and my intelligence services haven't told me that the Russians are propping up Bernie Sanders, so where have you got this from? He says that on Twitter. Trump looks good in this. Trump is the winner in this. The DNC don't care. They would rather win with Trump than lose to Trump, rather, than win with Bernie Sanders. Same as the Labour Party over here would rather lose with anybody than win with Corbyn. They'd rather lose to Boris Johnson with somebody else than win with Corbyn. It's the same thing. It's almost like a carbon copy of what happened to Jeremy Corbyn last year. So I think the chances of Bernie becoming the nominee right now, well, they have gone down. And I think most people would agree with that. I was certainly, I was not surprised. I'll say this, I wasn't shocked by this. Nothing shocks me anymore. I think they're rigging this against him again. And he's left the door open for them to do it because he should have called it out. And sooner or later, his base are going to get pissed off with him. The same as Corbyn's base got pissed off with him last year. If he keeps doing this. And even if he does win, here's the thing, even if he does win, he's got a fight on his hands. You've got a fight on your hands in America. The people have. Because not only will he not have Well, he'll have the entire Senate and Congress against him. He'll have the Republicans against him. And all of his enemies will be behind him in the Democratic National Party or Democratic National Committee. Honestly, if you want proof that the DNC is not democratic, look at the other countries around the world. Look at other things around the world with democratic in the title. Democratic People's Republic of Korea, not a democracy. Democratic Republic of Congo, not a democracy. Democratic National Committee, not democratic, not a democracy. And all of this, of course, is why, regardless of any of this politics nonsense, honestly, politicians right now, I say right now, the last 4 years I've been doing this, all I see is politicians getting in the way of progress. That's all I see, because they're corrupt. Only a mass movement of people in America is going to actually change this. Because even if Bernie does win, you can't go to sleep then. That's when the real work starts. You know, the politicians, I think George Carlin was right. The shit they shovel around every 4 years, they're standing in the way of progress, you know? And I wouldn't be surprised if going forward this year, if Bernie does get any momentum behind him, the same sort of thing will happen with the DNC as happened with the Labour Party last year, and you might even get a faction of them splinter off, I don't know, to make sure that they lose to Trump. Think I'm kidding? They will do anything possible to stop him. And here's the thing, here's the worry if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter. Having watched what's happened with Jeremy Corbyn over here. We saw him last year, we saw him in the last few years, you know, stumble over this anti-Semitism smear and play into it and lean into it, just the way Sanders is leaning into this Russiagate nonsense now. We saw him do that, and then last year, we saw Jeremy Corbyn do the unthinkable, and that's go against his own base, his own support on Brexit. The biggest issue at the time. Their worry is going to be, well, if you're carrying on with the Jeremy Corbyn blueprint of how to go, how long before you capitulate on Medicare for all and settle for something, I don't know, maybe you'll go halfway and just say, oh, we can only get the public option, which you should have had with Obama, the very minimum. That is what happened on Super Tuesday. Bernie had a nightmare. Biden, well, somehow that man, Sleepy Joe, who struggles to go through 3 days without making some sort of gaffe, who honestly, most days I don't think knows where he is. I don't think he knows what state he's in. Confused, obviously, but what literal state or county he's in. He doesn't know from day to day. The man, honestly, the people who are pushing him right now, I think it's elder abuse. I feel so badly because I can see in America it playing out exactly the same as it played out over here last year. I really hope that there's a different outcome. And I really hope the mass movement of people happens in America, because it didn't over here. I was waiting all year for a spark to happen. No, it didn't come. They managed to pacify everybody and keep them in the dark, treating them like mushrooms by feeding them bullshit. It's happening over in America. The only people who are going to be able to stop it are the people. They're the only people who are going to be able to stop it. Talk to your friends if you're in America. Talk to your family. Talk to people, everybody. And trying to explain to them that healthcare is a human right. It's not something that should be a profit. By the way, Bloomberg dropped out after Super Tuesday. Bloomberg. The word is he spent over $600 million. He never... I think he entered at Super Tuesday and then went. That was it. $600 million he spent. I did some calculations. I'll bring it up on Twitter. I just did some quick research. If you want an example of how capitalist billionaires really are not your friend, I give you this. Every night, 4,000 New Yorkers sleep rough. Remember, Bloomberg was the mayor of New York. Every night, 4,000 of them sleep rough. On the street, in the subway system, or in public places. If it costs $38,000 for emergency shelter, like it says, like Google says, 38,000, and that's just a single adult. Obviously, some of those 4,000 will be 4,000 rough sleepers will be family. Doesn't cost as much. But if it does cost 38,000 to provide emergency shelter for them for a year, then Bloomberg could have paid for their shelter for the next 4 years. He could have paid for their shelter 4 times over. I've seen some estimates coming in at $800 million. That's like 5 times over. 5 years. He could have paid for them to have accommodation over their heads and get them on the ladder. You know, really get a chance to pull their boots up, as they say in America. But no, instead, he spent it on advertising, trying to stop a man, Bernie Sanders, giving them health care. That's the situation we're in right now. It's just serious, everybody. Sorry, everybody. I flicked a button there. Somebody said no sound. So, Anthony Reyes, sorry. Just in case you did. Sorry, when I moved my hand, I knocked the mute button. It's here. Little red dot. Apologies for that. Yeah, Anthony Reyes says, glad you're making the video. Love to hear your perspective. Thanks very much for that. And he also says, Biden won states he never visited in or spent a single dollar in or even had an office in. Something smells, doesn't it, Anthony? Something smells. It just smells real bad. I do not trust it at all. Thank you, Rob Juno. Yeah, I turned on the mic. Sorry, everybody. My big hands. I want to say a big thank you. Thanks very much for everybody who has sent donations. All the information's there. Can't do this without you. I really appreciate it. I am going to be running around. I got back from a screening of a movie last night about MH17 today, and I'm going to be running around up and down the country visiting some hopefully really interesting people for you and doing more videos of like this. I really want to keep abreast of American politics because they're gonna cheat him again, just like they did in 2016. Only this time I think it's going to be worse and more in the open. We'll see what happens. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Thank you very much for everybody who has sent donations. Thanks very much for all your support. I really appreciate it. And on that note, I'm going to get off. Thanks very much. And I'll be cutting videos from interviews that I've done over the next 24 hours and setting up some more interviews. Take care, everybody.